What's going on, guys? So in this video, I'm going to share with you my 5 tips for workout. What's going on, everyone? So in this video, I'm going to share with you my 5 top rules pertaining to your workout and your diet that you need to think about when you're trying to lose fat and really maintain muscle mass, get that nice lean, toned, built physique that you're looking for. And now these are things that I've done myself and also my clients. And I know these are common mistakes that people make in their diet phase because we're told we either, for example, have to eat low carb, we have to make sure we're doing cardio. And other videos I kind of talked about that, but I really want to just give you 5 takeaways here that you can use right now, whether you're trying to lose fat and really just maintain muscle, or if you're just trying to tighten things up and make sure you know what you're doing. So we're going to jump in. The first one, and this is really a big one for just muscle growth, muscle retention in general, whether you're bulking, cutting, or maintaining, is making sure you're training frequency. So you're training most muscle groups at least twice a week. Some of them can actually be trained a little more than that. For example, like arms, delts, abs, probably could be trained 2 to 3, maybe even 4 times a week. Whereas bigger muscle groups like your back, your chest, legs, maybe like twice a week, right? But the biggest key here is not once a week. When we train once a week, for example, say we train the legs on Monday, we blow them apart with all of our volume. By like Thursday or something, or Friday, depending on the recovery, you're probably ready to train again. But what happens is now, if you don't train for Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and then you train legs again on that Monday, you missed out on 3 days where those legs were ready to go. They just kind of sat there. When muscles sit there, they can kind of get complacent. They cannot be growing. So if you're trying to maximize what you're doing and gaining muscle mass, or retaining muscle mass, you want to make sure you're training it more frequently. Now, when a diet phase, it's a little harder because we don't have the calories to be able to just train, recover. So a lot of people will think they have to train less, and that's actually not the case, because the fact that we are under eating because we're in a calorie deficit to lose fat and lose weight, the body doesn't have the ability to hold on to that muscle mass because there's a stress on the body, which is not eating, and it wants to try and preserve its weight, so it's going to start eating at things, and that things is going to be body fat. It's also going to be muscle. But what we can do is we can train that muscle more frequently, and I'll get into the sets and reps of that, but we can train it more frequently so that it's getting the signal that it needs to be used. And when it needs to be used, the body will say, hey, we can't get rid of this. We need to keep this muscle mass because we have to do our work, which would be your hard workouts, and doing it more frequently is getting called upon. So the body's going to try and preserve that a little more than if you were training it once a week and it was just kind of burning fat and muscle. Now we're just going to kind of shift it to make sure we're maintaining as much muscle as we can, which is also going to impact your body composition at the end of it, where say you lost 10 pounds in a 12-week period. If you were doing these tips, you might only lose, of the 10 pounds, maybe it's a pound or 2 of muscle and 8 pounds of fat. Whereas if you weren't doing these tips, maybe you're looking at 5 pounds of fat loss, 5 pounds of muscle loss, and that is visually 2 different things. And that's kind of what happens when you see people who lose weight. They still got to have the gut, or they have the kind of the deposits of fat stores, and they're like getting frustrated. It's because they probably turned to not training with weights, did more cardio, and really lost a lot of muscle in the process. Number 2, take muscles to fatigue, like train them hard to near failure, almost failure. But really try and stay in that moderate to light rep range most of the time. And I'll get into why lifting heavy, we can do that as well. But most of the time, I would say like 80% of the time, or like if I'm doing 5 to 7 movements, basically the first one is like a heavy strength or power movement, and then it's all like that. So we want to make sure is when we're doing that, a couple things. We get to keep our training volume high, which training volume is going to play along with training frequency, how frequent we're doing it. It's going to keep it high, so we're just going to keep the stress and the stimulus on the muscle, make sure that it's staying there and it's getting the work that needs to be done. The next one about training in like the moderate rep range, so maybe it's like 8 to 15 reps, or sometimes even 15 to 25. Training to failure. So if you're doing a set of 20, it doesn't mean lightweight 20 and you're done. It means with a weight where 20 is near failure. What we're doing with that is by keeping the training volume high, we're able to get a lot of stimulus on the muscle, short amount of time. But we're also not beating up the central nervous system, which is recovered by a lot of like nutrition and sleep. And those typically can get a little difficult when we're cutting. And then also just helping out with the connective tissues, making sure we're not like overloading it too much, because if we're doing that really heavy all the time, lifting while in a diet phase, it can be very stressful on the body over time. So we want to kind of make sure we're playing it safe with that. And then lastly, you're getting more work done, so you're able to do more work in the session, which means more calorie expenditure in the session. And there's been sessions that we'll do where we're burning, 500-600 calories, which is the same as somebody might do when they do cardio for an hour. There might be like, 100 calorie difference, maybe a little more doing the cardio. But the thing is, when you do the cardio, you just spend the cash, you spend the calories, you don't get anything back. When you do the weights, you spend the cash, spend the calories, and then you actually get stuff back, right? You're building the muscle, you're maintaining the muscle, so it's paying you back for putting the work in, whereas cardio isn't. So that's why you want to focus on that. Now, I said earlier to focus on moderate to higher rep ranges. We still want to do some heavy compound lifts. So I'm not saying it's the bulk of your training, but maybe it's 20% of the one main exercise a day. And the reason being is we do want to try and maintain as much strength as we had during this. During a diet phase is not the time to try and gain maximal amounts of muscle and strength, because we're just not eating and recovering properly. But you still want to make sure you're not just neglecting all that, and then you get out of a diet phase and you feel weaker than what you will. I mean, you might feel a little weak, but it will come back quickly if you do it right. So I like to do anywhere between 5 to 10 reps on most of my compound lifts. So maybe it's like a squat on one day, and then like a heavy press on the next, and then maybe like a deadlift, and then maybe I'll do some power work, maybe like a power clean just to be powerful. That also helps hit the muscle fibers, the fast twitch muscle fibers. So like for example, the quads. The quads typically, most people, they have some fast twitch, but then they also have some kind of slow twitch or like middle fibers that can kind of be trained across the board. But like hamstrings are predominantly a lot of fast twitch muscle fibers. So if we're just training them only in that high rep range, you are going to get great muscle pump, which I recommend doing, but you still want to give it a stimulus to be able to say, hey, we still got to maintain that maximal strength, still got to maintain all that. So by doing, 5 to 10 reps, heavier weights, good contractions, you can at least hold that strength where it's at, or at least make sure it doesn't drop too much. Because again, if you can hold that pattern there, then when you get back on your diet, off the diet, and you're more into like a maintenance phase, it'll be much easier to come back and your body's gonna be ready to grow. And then the last two here are more diet based, but they do pertain to the workouts. So you wanna make sure that you're eating protein rich meals, and you should really be doing that already. General recommendation, like 1 gram per pound is what we kind of try to shoot for. And that's important because during a diet phase, we don't have a lot of calories. So we've dropped our calories as a whole. We've dropped our carbs down, our fats down. We're still keeping our protein high. We're really emphasizing the protein. So we want to make sure we have that because we have to train hard, right? A lot of people will think, well, I'm eating less, I don't have to train as hard. What happens if you're eating less, your body wants to lose muscle tissue. And if you're training less, your body wants to lose muscle tissue. So you're just going to lose a ton of muscle tissue, right? We want to make sure that we're still able to train hard, and protein is going to be the biggest thing here because we want to make sure that we are able to recover from those tough workouts, those high volume workouts, and really just extend our runway long enough to get through the diet. Now, aside from eating protein-rich diet, we also make sure we are still having carbohydrates. Despite what fitness fads out there and influencers want to tell you about low carbs the way to go, if you're somebody who wants to be slow twitch and just be aerobic and not have the muscle physique, then sure, go do that. But if you're trying to be out there and you're trying to gain muscle mass or even preserve it during a diet phase, you need to make sure you're still training hard, and how you do that is with carbohydrates. Now, I'm not saying go crazy high carb on me, that's more like a bulking, but you still have to make sure you are eating carbs, so just don't cut them out altogether. The biggest meal obviously is going to be after your workout, so making sure you're eating carbs. I typically shoot for about 30 to 50% of my daily carbohydrate intake is after the workout. And that's because when we work out, for example, say we're doing a leg day, the quads, hamstrings, glutes, within the muscle themselves, there's glycogen, which is stores of carbohydrates. So when you eat something, it gets pulled into the muscle tissue, and then the muscle uses that for exercise in the future. If we're continually, using the muscle and we're not refilling that tank, we're gonna run out. Just like a car, right? So you're doing big hard sessions, big long drives, you gotta put that gas back in, and then you do it again the next day, and you're putting gas back into that tank, which would be carbohydrates in your diet. If you don't do that, you're gonna run out, you're gonna stall out, and then you're empty. And when you're empty, that's when stuff comes to a screeching halt. So we wanna make sure we're always refueling that. And then lastly, how to lose fat and maintain muscle is you need to be in a calorie deficit. You need to be doing all 4 of these plus being in a calorie deficit. Now notice I never said anything about cardio here. Watch my other video about cardio. I posted it here. I'll put it in the show notes there. But when we're in a calorie deficit, we can eat slightly less than our maintenance, and maybe we got to play with that. But the biggest thing is, if we're in a calorie deficit and we're training hard with weights and we're losing weight, then you probably don't need to do cardio. We can use cardio at a time when you're training hard, you're training 3, 4, 5 days a week, you're eating and you're really consistent with your eating, and you're just having a little bit of struggles trying to lose a little extra weight. Instead of replacing a weight workout, you could do a little more cardio afterwards. The biggest thing here is a lot of people will try to replace their workouts, and they'll do, they're usually doing 4 or 5 days of weights, they're irregular, they're trying to diet, they'll say, I'm gonna do 2 to 3 days of weight, and I'm gonna do cardio on 2 to 3 days. Don't do that, trust me. Just do your weights, fix your diet, and do some small cardio if you need it. But I use cardio as a last resort. That's like 5% of my overall fat loss energy goes to cardio. So make sure you're in a calorie deficit. I recommend, starting out, making weekly adjustments, so weigh yourself in, twice a week. Compare your Monday to the previous Monday. Compare your Friday to the previous Friday. Don't compare Mondays and Fridays because we have variations over the weekend. If you're losing weight at about half a pound to 1 pound per week for most people, if you're a larger individual, say you're starting out above 250 or 300 pounds, then probably like 1 to 2 pounds is a good rate of weight loss per week. If you're losing that week to week, then just keep your macros the same. Eat the same amount, and then if you get to a point where you kind of stall out, then cut your calories a little bit by maybe 200 to 300 calories in that week, and take it week to week just like that. I typically will try to cut out fat and carbohydrate, but not a lot. Like probably most of my calories, I like to keep protein and carbohydrates in a diet phase, so I'm more of a lower fat, and that's what a lot of bodybuilders will do too, because they're trying to preserve that muscle mass. So if you guys want to know more about that, you can check out the RP Diet app. It's a link below. Does it all for you. Great app. You can use the code J2Fit. You can save some cash on that. But those are my 5 tips here on how to lose fat and maintain or maximize muscle retention or gain during a diet phase. So I hope you guys found this helpful. Make sure you guys comment below with any questions you got. Give me a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. Later.